Alright, let's write the method I was talking about. Here we go. So the name of this method is going to be private void create user system directories. Create user system directories. This method is not going to take any argument. Here we go. So I'm going to declare a string user home dir for user home directory. This string object is going to hold the path for my user home directory, and in order for me to get the user home directory, I can use the system.getProperty method. System.getProperty, which requires a key. And takes 2 keys as argument. Let's take a look at the API documentation for system.getProperty. So I can explain it properly for you. The java.lang package, we have a class called system, and the system class contains several useful class fields and methods. It cannot be instantiated. Among the facilities provided by the system class are standard input, standard output, and error output streams, access to externally defined properties and environment variables, a means of loading files and libraries, and a utility method for quickly copying a portion of an array. So if I wish to access some files and libraries and directories that are in my system, and some environment variables that are in my system, and also externally defined properties of my system, then I will need this class. Okay, so we have a get properties method. There is also another get properties method that requires a key to give you a string that represents the property. This one, get properties, returns the properties object. And here's another one that get property, it passes in a key and a definition. Let's go over here. You can see public static string get property string key string def gets the system property indicated by the specified key. First, if there is a security manager, its check property access method is called with the key as its argument. If this is no current set of system properties, the set of system properties is first created and initialized in the same manner as for the get properties method. The key here is the name of the system property, and the def is the default value. The string value of the system property, or the default value if there is no property with that key. Okay, so if I wish to get a system property and I also specify default value, I can use this method, and that's the method I wish to use. So let's go back to NetBeans, and the key, as I know it, I looked up from some tutorial, and I discovered that if you wish to get your user home directory, you simply type user.home. That's the key, and the default value is just simply going to be a dot. If you didn't have a user home directory, then the dot directory, which is like your root directory, is gonna be the default value. Alright, the reason why this is happening is because there probably are some systems out there who do not have a user home directory. Some Unix or Linux operating systems may not have a specified user home directory in their system. Probably it is there, but it's not specified as a system property. So if you don't get it, you can get the root directory and use it as a user home directory for the application. It's important to know that the user home directory is where we will be storing our database information. So that's why we need this user home directory, and we need the URL for it, and that's going to be stored in this string that's over here. Okay, alright, the next thing we are going to do is to create and set the application system directory. So we'll need the user home directory to do that. Let me just put a comment here so that I can remember what I'm doing. So this is create and set the application system directory. Okay, so what we're going to do now, I'm going to create a variable called string app underscore sys underscore dir to be equal to this dot db properties dot get property. Recall that we had a field here called db properties, and also recall that we will initialize that field by reading the configuration.properties file as an input stream, and then instantiate the properties object, and then load the input stream that was gotten from the configuration.properties file over here. We will load it inside the properties object. So if we load that, because this has to be done first before this, so if we load that into the db properties object, we can now get the properties that have been defined in the configuration.properties file. Alright, one of the properties that was defined in the configuration.properties file is the application system directory, which I labeled it as app_sys.dir. So I'm gonna just come over here and copy this with Ctrl+C. Then I'm gonna do Ctrl+Tab to go over to this resource manager.java file, and then I'm gonna come over to this this.db properties.get property, and then I'll pass in the key as app_sys.dir. Recall that all these were property keys, and these were the values. Okay, these are keys and these are values. So this is a key, and that will give me .sales-records. Okay, so in essence, app_sys_dir is gonna simply hold .sales-records. Okay, so that's how to get the application system directory. Alright, the next thing that we're gonna do is to actually this is not gonna be, this is just the name of the directory, the application system directory. In order to get the full path for the application system directory, I'm going to declare another variable that's just going to hold that. Oops, so I'm going to call this app system dir, just to make a difference from this other one, because this one is going to contain the full path of the application system directory. So the user home directory, okay, concatenated with a /, and since we are adding a // inside double quotes, and the // is an escape character. In order to escape the // you need to put another // to escape the inner // Alright, then we are going to concatenate that // Please note that there is only one // here. The other // is used to escape the // that is in here. Okay, I know some people will forget this. Alright, so what we're going to do is we are going to concatenate user home directory with the // and the application system directory. Okay, so I'm going to put the semicolon over there. Now I want you to know that the application system directory is going to be inside your user home directory. I think I've said that before. And my user home directory in my system is Xyneex. So I'm going to click on that, and it brings this. So this is my user home directory. If you don't know where your user home directory go to is, if you don't know where your user home directory is, go to your C drive, then go over to users, and then go over to your username. If you see your username, then that's your user home directory. So this is my user home directory, and you can see there are a whole lot of dots directories here. I call them dot directories, but the technical name for them are configuration directories. Okay, so here is the previous sales record application that I had already done, and recall that we're gonna do something similar. So let's call this sales record 2, because we already have a sales record directory. So I want to just recall that. So I want to make a difference. So this Xyneex, we're gonna our application directory is gonna be .sales records 2, because this one is the previous one I did, so I don't want it in any conflicts. That's why I have renamed this configuration of properties to be .sales records 2. Okay, so please take note of that. Let's go back to the resource manager. Okay, so now that we've gotten the full path to the application system directory, we need to create that directory when this method is invoked. And in order to create that directory, we need to instantiate a file object. You know, a directory is also a file, so we're going to create a file. I'm going to call this app system file directory to be equal to a new file, and I'm gonna store this app system directory app system directory inside as the argument of the new file constructor. Okay, so I have to import file from java.io.file. I want you to note that most of these things that I'm showing you is important that you check the API documentation to see and also read the documentation on some of these methods and constructors, like the file class. Let's go over to the API documentation and do a quick tour of that. If you go to java.io, you'll see that we have a class called file that represents a file in a system. So it's an abstract representation of file and directory path names. User interfaces on operating systems use system-dependent path name strings to name files and directories. This class represents an abstract system-independent view of hierarchical path names. An abstract path name has two components: an optional system-dependent prefix string, such as a disk drive specifier, / for the Unix root directory, or / for a Microsoft Windows UNC path name, and a sequence of 0 of string or most string names. A path name in an abstract path name may be a directory name, or in the case of Microsoft Windows UNC path name, a host name. Each subsequent name in an abstract path name denotes a directory. The last name may denote either a directory or a file. The empty abstract path name has no prefix and an empty name sequence. And you can go ahead and read all this stuff here to understand what a file is in Java. Okay, alright, so let's go back here. So now that we know what a file is, which is actually a class, an abstract class, but we can use it to create a file. So we can I'm gonna copy this app system file directory, which is a file instance, and then I'm gonna invoke the mkdir method. Now the mkdir method creates the directory named by this abstract path name. So in order to make it not to be abstract any longer, to create the real directory, this is going to be the full path, like I told you, the user home directory plus the user home directory / the application system directory. In other words, let me show you. For example, in this my user home directory Jefferson 7X, if I want to get the full path name of this application system directory of sales records, it's gonna be c:/user /Jefferson 7X /.sales records. So in the application that we are trying to build now, the directory that we're gonna create over here is gonna be c:/user /Jefferson 7X /.sales records 2. Okay, so you have to really get that in your mind before you can continue with this. Alright, so the next thing we're gonna do is to set the application database directory. Recall, if you take a look at here, I told you that the application system directory is I always make it different from the database directory. So this one is gonna store the database records, while other directories can be used to store the configurations for the application. Okay, so let's go ahead and set the application database directory. So I'm gonna put some comments so that I can remember what I was doing. Set the application database directory. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna create a string. Let me call this database _dir, and it's gonna be equal to the application system directory concatenated with and again I put two forward backslashes to escape characters, and the database directory. So database underscore dir, and it appears okay, I need to create that's a mistake. This is not what I want to do. Now the database directory is going to be this dot db properties dot get property, and now there is a property inside the configuration, the properties file called database directory. So I'm gonna get this key. This is a key. This will be the value. So I'm gonna pass it as the argument to this get property, and that will give me the database directory, which will be stored in this variable. But in order to get the full path for the database directory, I need to declare another variable. So I'm gonna call this database dir to be equal to the application system directory, which is this, concatenated with a backslash, again I escape characters, and that will be concatenated with this database directory that we got from the properties file. Okay, so this variable will now hold the full path to the database directory, and as in what I mean in this example is gonna be, for example, c:/user / Jefferson 7x / dot sales records 2 / sales underscore records underscore db. All right, so you can see there's a whole lot of configuration files and properties also created here, but I didn't create these ones. This will be created when we run or launch the application for the first time. All right, so finally the next thing we need to do is to set a system property. So I'm gonna say system dot set property, set system property, the key and the value. So the key for this system property is gonna be app dot system dot database, and the value is gonna be the database directory itself. Now what this means is that when you launch this application and this method is invoked, there will be a system property that will be added to the system, which means the desktop application itself will be able to add a property to the system. That's the operating system that you are running the application on, and that system property is simply going to be app.system.database, which will hold this database directory. In other words, in order for us to gain access to open up a connection to the database, which is stored in a directory, we will need this app.system.database property. All right, so I'd like to stop the video now, and that's it for creating the user system directories. In the next video, I'm gonna do something else. Probably we'll have to invoke these two methods. So I hope you found this informative, and thanks for viewing.